treaty. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and I recognize some names up there, so I'm excited for our first speaker series presentation. So we're at the same time in the headset and on live stream, and we're trying to get this series of speakers going to get more and more people in Prez and get people to enjoy really nice immersive presentations created by our speakers. So for today, we have a special guest. When we put out the speaker series, Brian was the first to contact me, and after that, we started working and scheduling dates. And to my surprise, the presentation you're going to see here today is 100% from. Oops, wait. I need to do that. Okay, is 100% done by Brian in Prez. So I was very that's fully done by Brian. It's a conversion of your talk. So I'm really excited to see it, to hear it. I've previewed the slide, so it looks pretty exciting. But I'm really now excited to see what's inside the content of it. So Brian is an expert in innovation, ex-Imagineer at Disney, worked in a number of startup in the innovation companies, innovation departments, and today is going to talk to us about the 5 components of your Walt Disney DNA. So we're going to get started right now. So here I present to you Brian. We don't have way of clapping. We need to think about that. Okay. So Brian, you can take it on. Thanks.
I can feel all the good vibes coming my way, so it's great. Thank you all for joining us. As Felipe said, when I first learned about After Now was already at least a couple years ago, and then he told me about this platform he's creating called Prez, and I wasn't really sure exactly what it was all about or anything, and he would show me like little prototypes and things, and so I'm really excited to kind of be here to be one of the first, if not the first, speakers outside of his company to present on this platform. And I think we've got most of the bugs worked out here. It's a really kind of fun, immersive way to do a presentation. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and start this now. And at the end, we'll have an opportunity, if you have any questions or comments or anything, we'd love to hear it. So, as Felipe said, my background is as a Walt Disney Imagineer. At the beginning of my career, I've then gone on to create a lot of really interesting jobs and consult with a lot of fascinating companies. And these days, I really focused 100% on being a innovation consultant to clients around the world. One thing that I've learned being an Imagineer and throughout my career is that everybody is creative. When I hear people telling me that they're not creative, I don't believe it at all. Everybody, I think, is creative and has the capacity to be creative. So I'm going to go over what I call 5 components of your Walt Disney DNA. Ever since we were like living in caves back in the prehistoric days and painting on the walls with berry juice and things like that, humans have just found a way to tap into their creativeness and innovation. The first component of your Disney DNA that I want to talk about is passion. Creative people, I think, tend to have a deep passion for what they do. And passion often means persistence as well. If you're passionate about something and you want to get something done, then you're going to find a way to do it. It may take a couple days, a couple weeks, maybe years. But people who are on that creative process will tend to see it through. They don't let things get in their way. Passion is one of the driving forces to make you as creative a person as you can ever be. Second is intuition. So when I talk about intuition, I talk about a gut feeling. Let me go back. I talk about a gut feeling here. So intuition, Plato, the famous philosopher, talked about ways of knowing things. He talked about the physical sense, being able to touch things, to feel things, to hear things, using our senses. He talked about education, about being able to learn things, going to school. He then talked about this third way of intuition, this third way of knowing things that he referred to as divine madness. And divine madness is, kind of like you get an idea, you have this gut feeling, you don't know exactly where it came from, but you tend to know it's right. And if you think about some of like the people who have done some of the most amazing innovation, people like Steve Jobs or folks like that, then you realize that they really kind of knew that they were doing something different and they went with it. They didn't let the voices of doubt, whether they were internal voices of doubt or external voices of doubt, they didn't let them get in the way of stopping them. This intuition is very, very important. A lot of times people get hung up on not wanting to go beyond a certain point when they're trying to innovate something because they're not quite sure if they've got the science behind it or they've got all the facts or everything. But the people who are the ones who are willing to kind of go out there and follow those voices in your head, doesn't mean you're going crazy if you hear voices in your head and people talking to you. It's I think, a very natural thing. Those are the ones, I think, who tend to have the biggest breakthroughs. So intuition, super, super important when you're talking about innovation. Number 3 is inclusiveness. Now, when I talk about inclusiveness, I'm talking about having an acceptance of different people, different ideas, being open-minded. There's a quote that I love from Frank Zappa. You see here, a mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open. And that's something I really, really believe, is that you have to have an open mind to be innovative, to be creative. You can't just be kind of stuck in your own paradigm of how things are, and that's the only way they'll ever be. I speak a lot to students, and one of the things that I talk a lot to students about is the fact that if you do the same thing as everyone else, you're just going to be like everyone else. To be innovative, I think you've got to be able to open up your mind, and you don't necessarily have to even agree with all different points of view, but just be aware of them. I think one thing that's like really important for creative people is that we have this, what I call a mental filing cabinet, where we just put a lot of different ideas. We file them away. We don't know exactly how we're going to use them or when we're going to use them, but we know that just by observing the world out there and filing all these different experiences away, whether a sight, a smell, some sort of experience that we've been through, not knowing how those are going to come back to serve us later, but knowing that they will. That, again, kind of ties back into that gut feeling in a lot of ways. So having an open mind, be accepting of different points of view, super, super important. We've all been in meetings where we've put an idea out there and someone has said, oh, that's not going to work, and right away they kind of shoot the idea down. And that's because they don't have that open mind, to be able to accept different points of view. So if you want to really innovate, make sure that you keep your mind as open as possible, accepting of new ideas, new point of view. Next one here is curiosity. So curiosity to me is a really kind of a fun part of our internal DNA. When I talk about curiosity, a lot of times I talk about it from the sense of having a kid's point of view, right? If any of you have got little children or been around kids, you know that they have a way of looking at the world that's very, very different from grown-ups, if you will. And a lot of us, we tend to get on with our careers and all of that, and we tend to bury that childlike curiosity. I call it, when I was Disney, I would refer to this as the Peter Pan syndrome. You don't ever want to grow up, right? So always having that childlike wonder and merriment about yourself. I remember there was a time when I was, my daughter was young and I was getting ready to take a trip up north, and it was snowing up north, and she would ask me a question. I still remember to this day. She looked at me and she said, "Dad, why is the snow white? Why is the snow white?" And I'm like, being a dad, I'm sure I made up something that sounded great to her and made sense and everything. But that's the kind of question that is going to come out of a kid. And I would challenge all of you to always have that childlike curiosity, always look at the world through the children's lens and question things, ask about why are things, the way they are, and how could they be different. There's a wonderful quote that I've used over the years, and it's, if you could, what could you do in your business that's impossible today, but if you could do it, would really profoundly change your work? And that's a really fascinating, great question to ask. It's called the impossibility question. What's impossible to do in your work today, but if you could do it, would change it in a profound way? If you could start thinking about that and looking at your work from that point of view and look at challenges from that point of view, you can really kind of come up with some really wonderful breakthroughs, because you're asking yourself not what's hard to do or what's difficult to do or what's been done before but hasn't worked. You're asking yourself, like, what's impossible to do, and if you could do it, how would that change it? And if you could somehow find a way to come up with those kinds of answers, that's how you're going to come up with things like iPhones and flying cars and all the wonderful things that we're able to experience now with technology and everything. Just being in the metaverse and being in this virtual environment, I mean, 10 years ago, people would be blown away. This is something that would have been thought impossible, but now here we are, and it's just wonderful to get those kind of breakthroughs based on that impossibility question. What's impossible to do today, but if you could do it, would profoundly change the way you work. And the last component here, number 5, emotion. So let's talk about emotion. Emotions can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? So the most creative people tend to be in touch with their emotions, right? They're not afraid to let their emotions be a part of the creative process. We've all heard stories about the tortured creative people, Van Gogh, who cut off his ear and, sent it to his lover, and, people who are dealing with all kinds of positive and negative baggage and stuff. But the most creative people out there tend to be very much in touch with their emotions. They tend to sometimes use that to their advantages. If you're working on something, get really involved with it, to get really into the artistic part of it, the technical part of it, whatever your job may be. I think you need to be very much in touch with your emotions, and not be afraid to let them kind of be a part of your work and manifest themselves in your work. So, the point of all this is that I really believe that if you focus and understand these 5 components of your Walt Disney DNA, and you understand how to leverage them and what they are, then you can really make huge changes and profound changes, not only on how you approach your work and your job and how you approach challenges, but really in your life as well. I mean, a lot of times I don't think the work and personal life can always be separated as easy sometimes as we might do. And these 5 components of your DNA certainly play a part not only in the office, but in your home as well. So by understanding, focusing on them, I think you can really kind of, like I said, build on that creative tool chest that all of us have. I want to give you an example of how Walt at one point used his creative Disney DNA to solve a challenge that was in front of him. People always ask, how do you think like an Imagineer? And one of the things I always like to tell them is, think about what would Walt do? That's a question that certainly at Disney we ask ourselves all the time. What would Walt do? Here's a great example of that. There was one point when he was building Disneyland in California. And Walt was very hands-on with that project. He would go out and he would walk throughout the job site and see how things were going. And he was very, very much hands-on. So one day he was out at Disneyland as they were getting ready to do the opening. And as he was walking through, he met with his head landscaper out there, and he asked how things are going. And the landscaper said, well, Walt, honestly, we've got some challenges. I don't know if we're going to be ready for opening day. And Walt was like, well, tell me a little bit more. What are your concerns? So what his landscaper told him was that there were a lot of small flower beds in different areas that were supposed to be landscaped, that they just didn't think they were going to have time to be able to get to them. As a matter of fact, they were like overgrown with weeds, a lot of these, what were supposed to eventually become flower beds. And it was a real issue because they had bigger, more important, more visible areas that they had to attend to. So the landscaper was really, like beside himself, how are we going to get all of this work done, and, what to do with all these weeds. So Walt just took a few minutes to think about it. And he said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to send some of your landscapers to the library with some of these weeds that are out there. And I want you to identify what they are, what their scientific names are, and that kind of a thing. And then I want you to go out and make up these little plaques and put them in the weed beds that explain what the weeds are. And they'll have the scientific name and the English name on there. And when people walk by, they're not going to see a bunch of weeds in the flower bed. They're going to see what must be these really amazing plants that, they should be there, and they're really unique. And that's exactly what they did. It's a true story. So people on opening day any of the areas that may have had like overgrown weeds in them. They didn't see weeds. No, they didn't see weeds. They saw these amazing, wonderful plants. So that to me is a great example of asking yourself, what would Walt do, right? How would he approach a challenge that was put in front of him? And I would challenge all of you guys, next time that you're kind of stuck at work or at home or wherever it may be, and you've got something in front of you that you're having a hump, to get over, ask yourself, what would Walt do? Because as Imagineers, we would do that all the time, and you'd be amazed when you leverage that Walt Disney DNA, how you can get amazing answers to some of the most difficult challenges in front of you. So that's my short presentation on the 5 components of your Walt Disney DNA. I'll turn it over to anyone out there if you have any questions or any comments or anything like that about the presentation or the platform. I'd love to hear it. And Felipe,
we're missing the claps. If you guys, if you want, you can raise your hands maybe if you have questions, or just if you want to clap, you can raise and raise your hands. That would show a little bit of a little clapping. And yes, this before, just I want to reiterate that this presentation was done entirely by Brian using the platform. I tried to help. We even give him 3D models and everything, but no. Brian used his own and found his own elements for this. So I'm really excited, really impressed by the outcome of it, and thanks for that talk. It's very inspiring for the content, and for now that I know what's behind the slides. It's true that there's a lot into the creative process. But before I go with my questions, does anyone else has other questions first? I have a burning one actually. Well, I'm going to ask it first because it's in my head right now. You talked about the passion and as one of the components, and I'm not really clear on how do you cultivate the passion? How that passion, because it's a kind of an elusive emotion, but also it goes also with how do you cultivate that?
So, there's an old saying that if you have a job you love to do, you never work a day in your life. And that's something that I really believe in, is that, first of all, I think for your work, you've got to find work that is personally meaningful to you, something that you're passionate about. I've been, very fortunate in my career where I've always been able to work in jobs that are interesting to me and all of that. There's so many people who go through school and then go through life based on expectations, and they go into a family business or they go into a career because there's a certain expectation that that's what they should be doing. And if you do that, then that's going to set you up for, I'm not going to say set you up for failure, but you're certainly not going to be very passionate about that kind of work. So for me, the number one way of making sure that you're passionate in your work is doing work that you love to do. Again, I go back to, I mentioned Steve Jobs before. If you've never watched on YouTube, or you can find it, he gave a commencement address several years ago at Stanford University where he talked about the importance of finding work that's meaningful. I think if you do that, then the passion's going to come. And sometimes I think, especially these days now, we hear a lot about the Great Migration or resignation, where people are like leaving their jobs and trying to find new work and all of that since COVID. Well, what I find a lot of people are doing are going back and kind of like looking at what really makes them happy. What are like the hobbies they have outside of work or the interests they have outside of work, and how can I leverage those in my work to really, do good in the world. So that's, for me, the key to passion is working in a job or in an area. And, even if you're in a job now, I would say that maybe isn't necessarily you're not the most passionate about, find ways to bring, new ideas and new ways of maybe doing your job into that work that reflect who you are as a person and your values and your interests. So that's a good question.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Our friend from VR for Work has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Philippe. It's Rick with VR for Work. Hi, Brian.
Rick, yes.
Thanks so much
Hey,
for your presentation. Really enjoyed it. And very general, broad question. Obviously we refer to folks like Walt Disney and Steve Jobs, and both of those individuals really excelled at taking new mediums like film and animation and technology and doing something unique and different with it. And we're kind of experiencing this presentation today in this relatively new medium of VR. And I guess I wanted to get your thoughts and general ideas about what you think is the opportunity and the direction that folks may look to find exciting new things to do using a medium like VR and with applications like After Now.
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I do a lot of work in the education space, and to me, I think the metaverse that's coming to us very quickly now is going to provide all kinds of amazing opportunities for new ways of providing education. And beyond that, I think just in terms of new ways for humans to interact with each other, we talked before about, 10 years ago, something like this would have been impossible. Now you can gather people from around the world in the same space, and you can go anywhere from outer space, right, to, the lobby of your office without leaving your home. So I think, it's what's really exciting to me is that a lot of VR space and AR that's out there, and a lot of other new technologies that are starting to really kind of mature now, artificial intelligence, robotics, things like that, are just going to really provide new ways for humans to just interact with each other that we've never had before, and to do things that we would have never had the opportunity to do before. So for me, that's one of the biggest prospects for these new technologies. Another one is also in the area of healthcare too, working with people who may be on, let's say, an autism spectrum, or people who are dealing with dementia, or maybe soldiers with PTSD, finding new ways to engage with people in those situations in new and exciting ways. I remember, I was caring for my mom who suffered from dementia, and a little bit earlier on in her condition, I took her into VR. I gave her my Oculus headset, and it was just amazing to see the reaction of that she had, of being able to go somewhere that was probably far beyond her comprehension, and how that really brought about some real positive change. So I think there are just going to be lots of wonderful opportunities in education and medicine, and all of that comes down to, like I said, just giving humans new ways to communicate and interact with each other. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Apologies.
Anyone else? Joe?
Yeah, Joe has a question.
Thank you, Brian. That was a fantastic presentation. I was at Disneyland 2 Fridays ago out here in LA. And it was, and I hadn't been in a number of years. And it always, sort of, I appreciate it more and more as I grow older, like what Walt Disney did. And it just I don't know if you've been out to Disneyland lately, but they have California Adventure across the way, and that was basically, it used to be a parking lot, and you go in there and it looks like a mall. Everything's flat and it's like boxy, and just sort of like there's a huge lack of imagination. Walt definitely would not have done that. But my question is, so that was just a comment. My question is your story about how he turned
wheat into...
Yeah, I was gonna say sour grapes into wine, or whatever the saying is. He like transformed that situation into a plus, and a negative into a positive. And your telling of that story with the pictures in this sort of presentation space, it impacted me more than it would have if it was a PowerPoint on a 2D screen or on a flat, like, traditional presentation. And I was wondering why did that story impact me more in my Oculus? Like, what is it? Maybe you can explain why I felt that way.
That's a great question, and that's, I think, something that a lot of people have been looking into, is what's the engagement factor in an Oculus and in virtual reality compared to let's say like a 2D PowerPoint. I think there are a couple of things that that are kind of at play here. One is that you've got obviously the 3D impact of it. You're taking what typically would have been a flat static screen that you're looking at, and now you're taking images and you can animate them, you can put them in an environment that completely envelops us. And different people, if you study education and learning theory, different people react to learning in different ways. You have some people who are more tactile learners, some people who are more visual learners, some people who are more audio learners. And in VR, in some ways, you can create almost all those kind of environments. We haven't figured out yet exactly how to do smell-o-vision. I'm sure that's going to come. But certainly, it's a very different kind of an audio and a visual kind of a experience than just looking at a 2D presentation. The other thing is that when you're in VR like this, even though we're all connected here by audio and can hear each other and all of that, you're really just kind of by yourself, really, in this environment. So you can focus a lot more on the material that's in front of you. And depending on how the presentation is created, I tried, when I was setting up this particular presentation, to use a lot of different techniques in bringing visuals, sometimes very, very close to you, sometimes further apart. There was the one on creativity where I had the woman's head, that kind of spun around, and I purposely brought that very, very close for the impact. Some people might have really loved that effect. Other people maybe not so much, but then I go to the next slide. Thanks. Yeah. Went to the next slide and, maybe wasn't so overpowering with visuals. So I think with VR environments, you've just got the ability to kind of take your content and do so much more with it and present it in a much stronger format. So, yeah, that's a good question. Thanks.
Thank you. One quick add-on. I noticed you had Mickey Mouse at the end. Is Disney going to come after you for that?
I hope not. No, I think I'll be fine. I hope not.
Awesome, thanks, Joe. Cool. Any last more questions?
Are you all asking yourself what would Walt do? I'll just put one more shameless plug out there. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, please do. I'm easy to find on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me an email. You can also visit my website, which is Brainstorm-Institute. You have to put that little dash in there, brainstorm-institute.com, and I'd be happy to follow up with any of you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was a success. That worked. Sorry, I'm focusing on the technical part. And I want to thank you everyone for coming and joining us on this first speaker series. I want to do again special thanks for Brian for working through all the little bugs that we had and the little pain of being the first to do this, and your patience and actually the creativity you put into your presentation.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot for that again. And hopefully we'll do a debrief with Jeff later today or tomorrow. I want to say again, thanks everyone for coming. And that will, for me, that will close our session for today in our speaker series. And yes, please keep in touch with Brian. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Do a little clapping. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Brian. Take care.